Before this video begins, I'm going to need you to leave a like and subscribe. Fun fact, everyone that subscribes to my channel actually increases the likelihood of winning a large sum of money. Now, this isn't really backed up with any scientific research, but do you really want to take that chance? Better like and subscribe. Just to be safe. Five Nights at Freddy's is a 2014 indie horror game created by Scott Cawthon. The game's success led to many sequels, spin-off games, books, along with a ton of fan-created content. I think anyone spending a minuscule amount of time on the internet around this time would have encountered some aspect of the Five Nights at Freddy's community or franchise. The hype around these games was immense at the time, and with videos titled like this, it's not really hard to see why. Just something about it drew in a massive community, and a massive portion of that community was children. Eventually, the success became so impossible to ignore that even Hollywood execs began to pay attention, thus leading us to Five Nights at Freddy's, the movie of 2023. I and most of the people watching this video are either aware of or have directly interacted with some aspect of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, or I'm just going to call it the FNAF franchise because it's a little shorter and I don't want to say Five Nights at Freddy's a bunch of times throughout this entire video, so I'm going to call it FNAF quite a bit. I personally was intrigued by the visual look and eerie tone of the game, as well as the gruesome lore that can be discovered from studying the backgrounds of the games. And by no means am I a fan of this franchise. I had a very surface level interest in the visual design of particularly the first game, and I took a little bit of a dive into the lore because I found aspects of it interesting and some of the concepts were quite scary. And that's kind of where my knowledge about the FNAF franchise ends. So I passed on the gaming aspect of the FNAF franchise, and I really focused on the lore because that's what I was most drawn to. We all find ourselves as internet dwellers eventually going down a rabbit hole of a thing we don't really need knowledge about, but we decide to watch an hour, 2-hour video on video game world building just because we're in that mood. I only watched the Wendigoon video, but I'm sure plenty of people went down the massive expanse of game theory videos, specifically on the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. There are seriously so many of these videos. By the way, this is the popular tab. These are the most popular videos on the entire game theory channel. The lore is interesting and the gameplay is fine. And that's okay, especially when you're planning on turning this into a narrative, into a movie. So you can take those lore concepts that are really kept in the dark and not really explored in the game and expand upon them and introduce them to a bigger audience that other people can now become invested in. Like myself, I don't want to play the games. I want to learn about the lore, and the best way to learn about the lore is through YouTube videos. I would love a direct source. So that's what the Five Nights at Freddy's movie planned to do. The massive explosion of popularity for the FNAF franchise immediately led to the green light of a movie back in April of 2015, and should be out. That can't be right. That was like 10 years ago. This movie can join the ranks of movies like Slender Man 2018, which release way beyond their expiration date and when people were super invested. Although I can't entirely compare that because no one cares about Slender Man at this point. It's a very small audience, where the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise and community is still thriving to this day. So it's not a one-to-one comparison. I just found that comparison interesting. Internet thing that became popular for Hollywood to notice and took a long time to get anything out of it. So, 8 years after its announcement, and it's finally here. So, what do I think? Spoilers for this video, please skip to this time code if you do not want to hear any spoilers for the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. A man named Mike Schmidt is hired to watch over a closed down Chuck E. Cheese type pizzeria that has been closed down for many years due to a sinister event in its past. Spooky stuff happens over the course of 5 nights, haunted animatronic characters, and a security guard watches to make sure nothing happens. That's the gist of it. In his past, Mike had his younger brother kidnapped when he was a child and is desperately trying to figure out who took him. He does this by going into his dreams and reliving the event that happened. This leads to a lot of scenes set in this forest and also causes Mike to sleep through a large portion of events in this movie, kind of missing out on the scary factor when your character sleeps through all of it. I should be feeling afraid for the main character. He's trapped in the security office avoiding these animatronics, but every other scene cuts to PETA dicking around in the woods asking children what happened to his brother. It loses the fear factor when it keeps pulling me away and giving me an escape from the fear. It's like if in Resident Evil there was a safe room in every single hallway. We have this really weird subplot involving Mike Schmidt's evil aunt wanting to gain custody of his little sister for the Social Security money. The aunt doesn't actually care about the little girl. If she really just wants to adopt her for the money, why wouldn't she just foster some kids? I mean, Josh Hutcherson's character is giving her a really hard time and making it very difficult. Why wouldn't she just foster some kids that would still get her money, but she doesn't want the kid at all. She just wants it for the money, but it's becoming such a problem for her that she is hiring people to break into Josh Hutcherson's job to destroy it, to make him look bad, to get him fired so she can gain custody, so she can get money. Just foster some kids. I don't know. It seems like so much work for her. Why would you do that? It doesn't really make sense. The performances were truly a diverse spread of highs and lows. Starting at the bottom, we have child acting. The classic. The main child actor started out as a perfectly passable child performance, but as with most of these things, enough scenes and enough screen time, the cracks start to show. Any scene of true terror was performed with that fake child scream where they don't want to actually scream and they do the ah. When children are actually terrified, to anyone that has nieces, nephews, little brothers, little sisters, anybody, when they are scared, you will hear their shriek and have an instinct in your head. It is a blood-curdling scream, and it is terrifying when you hear it well done in a movie, and more often than not, you do not hear it done well, and it is this lazy kind of performance with the kids where they give the fakey scream. A great director can work well with children to really elevate that performance to be completely believable, and clearly this director did not work either close enough with the kids or work well enough with the kids to really get that performance out and to make it passable. It was very distracting and bad. The rest of the performances were really good. Josh Hutcherson did a fine job as the protagonist, Mike Schmidt, but the real standout was obviously Matthew Lillard. Matthew Lillard is an incredible performer. Every scene in every movie he's in is always so captivating. He is such a fun performer to watch on screen. The way he reads his lines, his physical mannerisms, all of it is just such a fun performance. I love watching him in Scooby-Doo. I love watching him in Scream. I love watching him in 13 Ghosts. He just gives off such a charismatic and interesting performance in everything, and I love watching him, and he was great in this. And all of this was evident in this movie. He's great. The unfortunate thing, he's barely in it. I went back and watched all the scenes he was in, and he totals around 15 minutes in a 1 hour, 15-minute movie. That's nowhere near enough. What a massive waste of an amazing actor giving such a great performance. The final scene with him was the most fun I'd had in the entire movie, because the whole middle section is so boring and slow. And that leads us into more story elements, because the big reveal of who the killer is in the yellow rabbit suit, which is obvious for anyone that is vaguely aware of the lore, you'll know that William Afton is the villain in the yellow rabbit suit. And it's so incredibly predictable in this movie. I understand that I know the lore, and a lot of you might know the lore, especially if you're aware of it. Anyone watching it that has played the games will know this twist coming from a mile away. My problem is I don't know anyone that wouldn't be able to see this twist coming. He's the only other big actor in the movie that fits the description of the killer. They keep referring to the killer as he. They keep referring to it as a man who stole his little brother when he was younger. The only older actor is Matthew Lillard's character. So when he shows up and it's like a big reveal, yeah, we know it's him. I wasn't mad that it was him. I was glad to see him again. I love Matthew Lillard, but it's not a good twist. There was no intrigue. There was no mystery. There was no red herrings to follow of who it could be. It was just so blatantly Shaggy. And why did William Afton send Mike to work at Freddy Fazbear? He clearly was suspicious of Mike when he read his name as Mike Schmidt. From the very beginning of the movie, why would William send him somewhere that he knew had evidence of his murders? And then later in the movie, we find out that the cop that's hanging out with Mike Schmidt is actually William's daughter. And then when they confront each other, William says her only job was to keep him in the dark and kill him if he gets too close. Why would you send him there at all? Like, it was your decision. You didn't have to offer. Did you expect to send him there and die? Because, like, the animatronics didn't even attack him until the end. We get an incredibly brief scene with William Afton, which is the best scene in the movie before he dies. And it's so gutless, which is an issue with all of the deaths and gore in this movie. A girl is bitten in half by one of the animatronics, and it looks so ridiculously absurd.
Was that the bite of 87?
It made me burst out laughing. I don't even know how a mouth that wide, it couldn't have been more than 10 inches, bite through a human torso. There's no way you could bite through a human torso with that. I don't care how much ghost magic is in these things, you can't just bite through a torso like that. The cause of William's death in the games is described as one of the most terrifying ways to die in the series, and it's horrible to think about. But when it happens in the movie, it's bloodless, basically. The movie is just gutless. It has no guts. It doesn't want to show the gruesome stuff because it needs to keep that PG-13 rating. Before going into this movie, my biggest fear was that they'd cater to its biggest audience: children. With horror concepts as disturbing and as brutal as something that could be found in a Saw movie, it's not something you'd expect to get a PG-13 rating.
They'll most likely see you as a metal endoskeleton without its costume on. Now, since that's against the rules here at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, they'll probably try to forcefully stuff you inside a Freddy Fazbear suit. Now, that wouldn't be so bad if the suits themselves weren't filled with cross beams, wires, and animatronic devices, especially around the facial area.
It's a truly scary thought that creates a vivid image in your head as to what would happen if this horrible fate were to befall you. I played the first game in preparation for this video, and one thing that stood out was the unsettling tone the game had. Staring at grainy security cameras and the overwhelming white noise that leaves your mind reeling on what could happen any second, it's a genuinely scary feeling you sit with. Even if it ends with, a pretty lazy jump scare, it's still unsettling, and you're constantly, the hairs on the back of your neck are raised because you're constantly living in fear of what's going to happen. And you're paranoid and watching every single camera, looking for minor differences. It's fun, it's engaging, it's interesting, and I was scared playing the game. Put headphones in, you play the game, I was unsettled. Not one single scene left me unsettled in this movie. I'm just shocked that the movie underutilized the fear that is found by staring at security cameras. Just put a few really long takes of static security cam footage of the camera not moving and just things in the background moving, just to make you go, what was that? Make you feel like you're forced to be staring at the security camera. You don't want to, but you have to. That's the feeling the game gives, and nothing in this felt like that. Nothing created that fear. The character design was also something that was really bothering me. The animatronics are ripped directly from the games, I know that, and sometimes that can be a good thing or even a great thing. But I think a more realistic look for these characters would have benefited the movie. The only change to the character design were the eyes, and it made them look infinitely worse. The glowing white dot eyes from the games are very eerie, and instead of that, they've changed them to this corny, glowing red evil eyes. The red eyes, they look ridiculous. And even more insulting, the Springtrap suit utilizes the white eyes found in the game, and it looks perfect. It looks very spooky and eerie. It's what all of them should have had, and they just don't. They get these lame red eyes. Also, what's up with the animatronics? What are the mechanics of the animatronics? What are the mechanics of ghost children possessing animatronics? By the way, there's a line in this where he just goes, "Ghost children possessing giant animatronic robots?"
Ghost children possessing giant robots?
What's the mechanics? There's a little cupcake animatronic, I think, that's possessed by a kid, and it has no limbs, and I don't think it has wheels or anything like that, but it can fly, seemingly. There's parts where it's just on a shelf and then it'll just leap at somebody and attack them. So it can just move, but there's no wheels or any movement to it. So it does something to attack the people. It lunges, I guess, but there's no like mechanic in the cupcake to do that. So if that's the case, why don't all the animatronics just, I don't know, just fly? I don't know who's at fault for the issues in this movie. I don't even know if the director had that much say over what happened. Chris Columbus was originally attached to direct this movie and then left for creative differences with the game's creator, Scott Cawthon. The film's producer, Jason Blum, said this: "I don't want to do something that Scott doesn't like." Let me say that a different way. I don't have the right to do anything Scott doesn't like. Basically, Scott has kind of like the equivalent of Final Cut, and it's taken longer than I hoped to get the right story. Well, that explains why it took so long to get this movie out. Overall, I think the FNAF movie is incredibly lacking in what made the original series so scary. It is lacking in its intense concepts and gruesome deaths. It is a watered-down version of the original, manufactured to sell to the biggest audience possible. And hey, it seemed like it paid off. The movie cost $25 million to make, and it's currently made $120 million while writing my script. So expect lots and lots of Five Nights at Freddy's sequels to come out for the years to come. This is clearly not for me. And the fans are seemingly enjoying this, and I'm really happy for them. I'm glad they got something that they really liked. Personally, this is not something that I could see myself spending money on. I'm glad it was streaming. It just didn't do a lot for me, and I'm happy with all the fans that they got exactly what they wanted. If you are a fan and you didn't get what you wanted, please let me know in the comments down below. It's seeming to get general good feedback from general audiences. Look, I mean, Jason Blum told us which number is important. The critic rating, don't worry about that. Look, he circled the important one. Don't worry about that number over there. Don't look at that one. To me, it is just spineless in the way it attempts to portray its horror. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comments down below. And I'm giving the Five Nights at Freddy's movie a 3 out of 10. Bye.